Well, good afternoon. I'm Ken Biberai, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. In the news today, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina suspended his presidential campaign, and President Biden is set to meet with Chinese President Xi on Wednesday in San Francisco. Today's topic is investing in American manufacturing, and we're joined by Giulia Siccardo, the Director of the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains at the Department of Energy. Great to see you.
Great to be here, Ken.
So this is a new office, right? Tell me about it. You're a startup, right? I mean, at a cutting edge place like the Department of Energy.
Yes, we are a startup in one of the biggest corporations in the world, the U.S. government. And we were formed about a year and a half ago, and something really exciting happened. Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act were passed, and a historic amount of funding came towards the Department of Energy for investing in energy supply chains. And, this was a clear signal that we were about to enter a transformative chapter for, clean energy, for electric vehicles. But this type of investing was something that, we'd not done before at the DOE. Our office, the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, was formed as an investment arm of the DOE with the purpose of deploying capital into clean energy supply chains and focusing both on manufacturing capacity and on workforce development to make sure that we have the workforce and the manufacturing centers here at home to be able to participate and lead in that energy transition.
So do a little bit of a 101 about the ecosystem, right? Like there's the loan program office. Jigger's been on the show. We have the Department of Commerce and CHIPS. How does this all tie in? Where does your office fit in?
Absolutely. So government and DOE can look like a black box from the outside. So we'll do my best to demystify a little bit. But basically, about a year and a half ago when we were formed, the DOE actually reorganized, and we split into two parts. So at the DOE, we talk about our focus on research and development. That's, of course, been a legacy for DOE with very famous programs like ARPA-E, where we have been, really investing in researchers and academic institutions that are, bringing up really important innovations for us to be competitive in the energy space. So R&D being kind of one half, we are continuing to be, extremely active and excited about that. You guys may have tracked our Earthshot program and, very exciting announcements coming out of that. But we kind of created a new half of the DOE focused on infrastructure, and that is led by Undersecretary Crane. And that's where I sit, where Jigger sits, where all of the offices that are focused on what we call D&D sit. D&D is demonstration and deployment. This is at scale, big stuff. Even so, our Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations is probably the most exotic office within our world. And they are focused on really big projects, things like hydrogen hubs, things like DAC plants. We haven't really done that before in the US, but it's a really big, capital project. We need to stand it up. We need to really build an ecosystem around it. That's what they're doing. Then you've got us, we're looking at manufacturing, scaling up production of commercialized products. You've got an offtake agreement. You've already done the pilot plant thing. You're looking at needing $100 million check, on a $750 million construction project to stand up a gigafactory processing center. We're there to provide what we call non-dilutive equity.
Right.
And then north of us in that commercialization journey, you've got the loan programs office. So you're looking for debt, you're eligible for that preferred financing, and that can be a huge boost to your acceleration and commercializing.
And just talk about the magnitude of the dollars involved, right? I think it's always important to level set. This isn't something that existed always, right? There's a true bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction. Talk about the magnitude of that investment being made by the federal government, and then just the check sizes that your office, LPO, are putting out, and how you hope it's going to actually ignite and accelerate.
Absolutely. So the magnitude is staggering. There was this bipartisan effort that came out of Congress, which resulted in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which brought to bear programs like CHIPS, programs like all of our activities at the Department of Energy, further capitalized programs in Department of Defense as well, and this volume of funds is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, billions with a B. They're very significant. What came to DOE is about $400 billion that we are investing across different programs focused on not just fully funding a particular project and making that go forward by brute force, but actually on picking a project and making a minority investment at the project level. That is how we operate. So, we'll be up to 50% of what capital that project needs to go forward, and prefer to be smaller so that we can actually play a role in catalyzing private capital, strategic capital to come in and make that project work. What we like to pick, and here, I'm focusing particularly on our office, what we like to pick are projects where we've been underinvested in that segment of the supply chain before, or it's something that we have not done before in the US. Reason being that can be a proof point, not just for US manufacturing, but also a proof point for financiers to learn what the returns are like in such a project, to participate in that project in a de-risked manner, and then be able to replicate going forward.
So talk a little bit about, I think COVID just opened up everyone's eyes around supply chain concerns, around semiconductors, around just getting resources back to America. Talk about where were we kind of as a nation as it relates to supply chain? Where are we kind of today, and where do you think we should be in terms of having a stable supply chain, no disruption? The private sector obviously cares about continuity, and disruption is always a challenge.
Yeah. So if you look at of course, prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic surfaced a lot of the vulnerabilities that existed in our supply chain, but also even just a few years ago where, we were further behind in terms of innovating and, deploying new energy solutions, new transportation solutions. We were, I think, very comfortable importing a lot of what we needed, a lot of these critical resources. And if you think about that behavior and that operating model is not one that was unique to this moment, but actually, if you kind of reach back and look at the kind of legacy energy economy, which we're still in, primarily fossil fuels based economy, we have been, very, very comfortable and, by requirement, needing to import foundational elements of, what allows us to ship goods, what allows us to keep the lights on and, power all of our activities from very localized regions in the world. And what we really have the opportunity to do now, kind of, building on what was experienced during the pandemic, building on this realization that we have a bit of, a chance to reset the table, is to create an energy economy that does not need to be as overly dependent on specific regions, and that over dependence on specific regions can lead to vulnerability and can lead not only to higher prices, but also, challenge in actually procuring, essential goods and resources. And so, as we think about, a more electrified economy, we are still dependent on natural resources. Critical minerals are the new fossil fuels in many ways. But, we do have an opportunity to think about, one, how do we, bring more of that, critical mineral supply online in a sustainable and ethically responsible way, here at home. Two, how do we strike up partnerships with countries that are taking the same standards and, supplying us with potential materials from outside of our borders. Three, how do we think about, recycling and circularity? I'm sure all of us have a drawer somewhere at home that's filled with some old phones and, electronics. How do we, bring that in and, create an opportunity for, for us to already be using the minerals that we've already bought and brought into this country? And then how do we, innovate further so that we, don't need to be as dependent on these minerals? But, we have so many strategic opportunities here to kind of, reset and drive that supply chain resilience. And those are kind of some of the fun problems I get to work on.
Yeah. And it seems like a proactive office, right? I think recently you were in Australia, you've been in France, right? This requires a global effort, even though it's a domestic supply chain, right? Talk about how you structure, identify partnerships or build those kind of relationships to kind of enhance and strengthen the domestic supply chain.
Absolutely. So our domestic supply chain is of course foundationally important. But as we look at where different critical minerals are located, it's very important to understand what the natural endowments are globally, and that part of course we cannot change, but we can think about how to partner in those countries, to partner with other countries to co-develop resources that sit outside of our respective countries. But really, again, take that proactive stance. The second piece is, where is all of that material processed? And that's a piece where, we do have more control. This kind of, we call it midstream to kind of take an oil and gas term and reapply it. But this kind of processing part of the supply chain, is one, again, where, we've been very comfortable letting that happen somewhere else. And we are taking again here a more proactive stance. We invested in what will be the first nickel processing plant in North America during the about $2 billion investment round that we deployed last year, and that plant will be in North Dakota at a brownfield site, where we're going to be revitalizing and creating jobs and bringing a very important piece of infrastructure that will serve not only the U.S. but also Canada. Here in the U.S.
Wow, that's incredible. How do you think about the call to action for the private sector, right? Like, what is your message to the private sector? What do you want people thinking about? It seems like inherently there's always kind of a barrier to entry, right? So thinking about not just the big companies out there, but the startups, like you've mentioned, right? Like smaller companies that maybe don't have full lobbying teams or all the resources. Like, how accessible is your office? These resources. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So highly encourage everyone to log on to our website and sign up for our newsletter. We're constantly putting out information about funding opportunities that are available, and we really deeply look to engage with the private sector and ensure that our opportunities are accessible. We are also very much so while we're very active, my office alone, we will be deploying in about the next 12 months about $20 billion. Wow. So we are extremely active. We're also, moving very fast. And, one of the things I always share with our portfolio companies is we really appreciate feedback. So, if you see an opportunity that feels unclear or, is confusing, or there is part of the process that is challenging, we would like to hear about it. There are, links where you can share feedback and questions and email. And we really do, take a look at that. The Department of Energy, overall is doing something, very new with investing in this segment of the commercialization journey in this way. As I mentioned, our legacy has been on, working with smaller, more research-focused, earlier staged ventures. And LPO has been kind of at the end of the spectrum, focused on debt financing for entities that were already commercialized, really building the gap for an entity that is, making its first foray into, manufacturing at scale here in the U.S. That is new for us. And so, we need to build this out, we need to make it more efficient, and, really welcome the feedback. The piece I would, message I would have for the financiers would be, we are very excited to work with you. We were very excited to be on the same side of the deal table with the investment community. We invest at the project level, but we don't actually dilute the capital stack. So it's a very attractive opportunity for us to collaborate, even during the diligence process, and actually drive to a deeper outcome. And so we really welcome opportunities to both engage in investment thesis dialogue with other private sector investors. But also to support companies in our respective portfolio's.
So you touched briefly upon like the circular economy and this kind of notion that we really need to be more intentional about this, especially with advancements in battery and so on and so forth. Talk about where we are on that in this country, right? Like, what's the state of the circular economy? What's the opportunity? What kind of innovations are you seeing as it relates to that?
Yeah. So one of my favorite facts, and it is perhaps a depressing fact, but it is that only 5% of lithium-ion battery materials, consumer batteries, and electric vehicle batteries today are collected and recycled. 5%. You look at other sectors like corrugated cardboard, glass. We are as a society capable of achieving recycling rates in the high 90s for many of these materials, which may be lower value and less critical to energy security, to national security. So, we know that it can happen, but we've not focused on this in the past, not been as invested. We are, of course, at the beginning of this energy transition. And so, there are signals that are,
Huge
running their
opportunity.
course.
Yeah.
Huge opportunity. But, we invested upwards of $500 million in our last round, actually, in companies that are focused on recycling.
Wow.
And recycling related activities, moving from not just smelting and leaching the battery materials, but actually converting those into new precursor materials that can go into new batteries. So this will continue to be an investment focus area for us. We are watch the space, but we are around the corner from announcing about $4 billion more that we are going to be investing across critical minerals and batteries. And recycling, continues to be a new area for us, where we're looking for innovative companies with, U.S. activity to, further join our portfolio.
That's amazing. Now, look, I think you have such a unique background, right? Like this office is new, but like you're new to government, it seems, right? And
Yeah,
career at McKinsey and well established and kind of your thought leadership and impact on sustainability and clean tech issues, right? Talk a little bit about your background personally, how it's kind of prepared you for this role and why you left the private sector. I mean, it's always exciting, I think, when new blood and energy and ideas come in.
Yeah. So I was previously a partner with McKinsey, where I was focused on leading our practice that scales up clean energy ventures. So I was working with some of the biggest automotive, energy, tech companies in the world, also with some very exciting startups to help them build out their operations and business units focused in clean energy products, clean transportation products. It was a dream job, and I absolutely loved it, and felt that it would be very hard for me to leave, and that's until this opportunity came up. And I'm someone who's very motivated by impact, and I think that's why I stayed at McKinsey as long as I did. I was there for 11 years, and folks who've been in consulting or banking know that that's dog years.
Yeah.
So it is, but that it was always incredibly motivating for me to be kind of working on these topics. And so to have the opportunity and the honor to be able to work on these topics, but at such a bigger scale, deploying $20 billion in a year is something that in the private sector, we just don't do. Yeah. This is kind of, operating at a different level, and it is an opportunity. While, the programs that were set up by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, are incredibly bipartisan, and are maybe be a kind of small bright spot in some of the things that we can agree on today. In politics, funding at that level is not something that will kind of continue to happen. Mm-hmm. These are programs that are getting this kind of huge boost now, and then will be funded at a more ongoing level in the future. And so being able to be part of that kind of, first wave of this, and, standing it up, hopefully in a way that can continue and have a long legacy is an honor and a challenge that I knew that I'd regret if I didn't jump in on. That's why I'm here. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, so inspiring. And, I think we just love that, right? Like anytime you talk to somebody in government, the enthusiasm, like this real opportunity in this moment, it really seems like a kind of collision of capital, kind of cadence and coordination in a way that really does involve all stakeholders. I mean,
yeah, I think that's such a great point, Ken. It's this public and private capital collaboration that is something that I think, and even in my dialogues in other countries, something that is really coming to the fore as a theme that is not going away, that really is lasting, because the scale of these infrastructure projects is so massive. This energy transition is going to be a $10 trillion energy transition. That's the amount that is projected that we need to spend by 2050. That means that, every year we need to be spending hundreds of billions of dollars. We need an IRA every year, to get there if the government were to do this by themselves. Yeah, but the point is that, we need to catalyze that private capital. We need to go in on the right investments and then get that flywheel going. So, that the private sector, can take and run with things and, do what capitalism does best. But, we're setting it on a course, hopefully that will be one that is constructive for our manufacturing economy, constructive for high quality labor, constructive for equity. That's the dream here.
And I think I mentioned this to you, like in the day job, I spend time helping companies with site selection. And what I think has, kind of most surprised me or excited me is that just the geography is all open, right? And it's fascinating because if you're an oil and gas company, you have to go to a certain area. If you're trying to tap natural gas, you got to go to a certain area. If you're a mineral company, but if you're manufacturing or creating some of these new technologies, you can be, in Arizona or Florida or Kentucky or Dakota. And I think it's just so amazing because when we travel and just go look at these sites, it's not just like, hey, we just need a site and cut a real estate deal. It's like folks from economic development, folks from the city council, folks from the governor's office, folks from the technical college, from the university, right? This coordination is like everybody, right? It's about creating the labor demand and so on. So how do you think through workforce? How do you think about engaging even like the local partners, and how important is that, right? Like the entire country, I think, appears to potentially benefit from these large scale investments. Like,
absolutely. And the deep intent. So unlike a private sector investor that is, focused, primarily on returns and then, occasionally other metrics depending on the class of investor, we are very focused on kind of creating that societal benefit. So, we want the returns, not because we sit on the cap table and earn the returns or, for that reason, we want the company to be a going concern and, again, set off that economic flywheel. But we also look really closely at, what was the quality of the jobs and what is the path to employment at this facility? Is there a strong labor plan that may include a project labor agreement that, may include actually working with local universities and colleges to, set up a apprentice program, working with union workforce training programs to, draw a line of talent, into the project. We really look at, all of these factors because, if we've seen, if these projects are structured in a way where, the benefits flow back into that community, they're set up for, more success in the long run and, a longer history of operation, which is, what we're trying to seed here, not work on projects that will be a flash in the pan, but, not resonate and anchor. So it is very much, a focus for us. And, when we select projects, we actually scrutinize on that level. We also actually run programs that are fully focused on workforce. I mentioned kind of the two parts of MESC are, we're investing in manufacturing capacity. We're also investing in workforce. People are the gears that, make all of our supply chains run. And some of the programs actually that we operate at MESC have been part of DOE for upwards of 40 years. One of these is, it's called the Industrial Assessment Center program, which does not sound very exciting, but it is a very exciting program. We basically fund teams of grad students and professors from community colleges, four-year universities, and have them go into manufacturers and run an assessment, basically run a scan of all of the opportunities that manufacturer can have to improve efficiency, to decarbonize, to strengthen their supply chain sourcing plans, and bring those recommendations back for free to the manufacturer. What this does is it, obviously creates a benefit for the manufacturer that's receiving this DOE vetted information, but it is also creating an opportunity for students to, get into the manufacturing workplace and start to learn the trades and apply their knowledge, in a real setting. Further, there's opportunity for those manufacturers to apply back to DOE to get us to fund half of the upfront capital cost to actually implement those recommendations, which, makes the cost benefit always look really good. And, we run a competitive selection on those programs, but we're always looking for opportunities of, where can we pull in talent into this equation, whether it's reskilling, whether it's, training, the young people who have not yet entered the workforce. And, I could speak much more at length about any of these, but that's a little bit of a taste of kind of how we structure some of these programs.
Well, we had a question come in, so it seems timely. I want to ask,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
How do you handle kind of assessing companies from overseas that maybe are coming to the United States? So we see it all the time, right? Like a Scandinavian, Slovakian company, they come, they see incentives, and they want to set up operation. And I assume as part of your roadshow, you want the best technology and talent from around the world coming and setting up opportunities here. So how do you think about that and kind of even assessing them as qualified candidates for some of these programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do welcome international companies to come and set up manufacturing here in the U.S. And we we have actually already awarded companies that kind of fit that criteria in our first wave of investment that I mentioned. I believe we have a Belgian company and an Israeli company in our portfolio. We do not invest in international activities or in those companies themselves, but we will invest at the project level in a U.S. project of a U.S. subsidiary that is incorporated in the U.S. and is majority owned in the U.S. Of international companies. And so we are very focused on the economic benefit being created here and staying here. And I think it's to your point, very important for us to be able to bring in know-how from other countries. We do have a hard stance on what we call covered nations. And any foreign entities of concern. And so any companies or companies whose subsidiaries are overly influenced by any foreign entities of concern would be screened out through our process. But I think the companies that kind of pass through that rigorous screen are making some really exciting contributions. Our Belgian project, this is public, is Solvay in Georgia. They're going to be making binders, which is the glue, roughly to speak, that holds the battery together. Which is an area where we do not have much operation here in the U.S. Our Israeli project is going to be making lithium iron phosphate cathode material, which is for batteries that are a bit more on the affordable side, and we are not manufacturing here in the U.S. So all projects that are really bringing in know-how and key segments of the supply chain that were previously uncovered.
Well, look, before I let you go, what kind of challenges are you worried about? What kind of, roadblocks to progress? What are the things that kind of slow down this process or that you're kind of seeing on the horizon that may give you pause or concern?
Yeah, obviously we are, we're trying to thread a very fine needle in terms of scaling up manufacturing capacity fast. And also, picking the best projects possible. What will help us do that is, making sure that folks who, have operations in this space are kind of coming to us or engaging with us, are applying, and that we are getting out there and, connecting with companies and kind of demystifying this process. You touched on something that is, very near and dear to my heart, in that, it can be without knowledge of how things work in DC, without knowledge of, how a government agency functions, particularly for startups that, may not have a full, government affairs team or even an individual full-time that is working on that, can be hard to spend the time to kind of dig in and understand. So, I think we are looking to really try and simplify, to kind of democratize access to, we are, already, moving as we're going now. So we're putting out funding opportunity announcements, but, as we go forward in the future, shortening those and, making sure that there's less jargon, that, you don't have to read through 150 pages, but the message can come through in a, clear 20, as much as we can within the confines of, statute and our requirements, but, really trying to demystify, simplify, democratize.
What an exciting time to be in government. I appreciate you coming on and sharing so much with us. And I mean, whether it's thinking through the supply chain, innovations in energy, or even just national security, reshoring, and resiliency, it seems like an exciting time to be there.
Thank you. No, it certainly is. Every day is lively, and it's an honor to get to tackle this challenge, and a lot of fun to get to chat with you today on this.
Yeah, well, thank you, and for everybody tuning in, thanks for watching. We'll have this interview and others on coffeewithken.com, and you can also follow us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. Until next time, thanks everybody. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.